History rarely announces its turning points. More often, the biggest transformations in our financial world happen quietly, inside offices with locked doors, during emergency sessions, or under the cover of complicated language that only a handful of people truly understand. But each time these hidden decisions unfold, they redraw the map of wealth, power, and who ultimately controls the meaning of money. Today we're stepping back into one of the most dramatic of those moments, not because it belongs in the past, but because its blueprint is being rebuilt right now with digital tools far more sophisticated than anything imagined a century ago. On April 5, 1933, the United States government made it illegal for American citizens to own gold. Within 10 months, federal officials had collected more than 300 tons of privately held gold and then swiftly revalued the dollar. That single decision transferred billions in purchasing power away from ordinary people and straight into the Federal Reserve System. This wasn't described as theft. It was presented as necessary monetary policy. And here's the part that matters most today: the exact same architecture from 1933 is being reconstructed now, only this time its engine is digital, instantaneous, and far more powerful. To understand the present, you must understand the original pattern. Imagine the scene. March 9, 1933. Franklin Roosevelt has been president for less than a week. The banking system is frozen under emergency orders. Inside the Federal Reserve Board building in Washington, D.C., Treasury officials and New York Federal Reserve executives study ledgers showing collapsing bank reserves. Their task is monumental: design a plan to reset the entire monetary system of the United States. The obstacle facing them was gold. American citizens were holding roughly $4.2 billion in gold coins and certificates at a time when the nation's money supply was suffocating. The Federal Reserve, created only 20 years earlier, couldn't expand credit because every dollar required gold backing under the Gold Standard Act of 1900. What these officials built over the next weeks would permanently redefine the relationship between American citizens, their money, and the federal government. On April 5, Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, demanding all individuals and businesses surrender their gold, coins, bullion, and certificates by May 1. You had just 26 days to comply. The price was fixed at $20.67 per ounce. Refusal meant a $10,000 fine or a decade in federal prison. Imagine the situation: federal notices arriving at homes, families forced to hand over gold passed down through generations. In exchange, they received paper bills, essentially IOUs, from the very institution requiring the surrender. By December 1933, the New York Federal Reserve had absorbed 3,605 tons of gold, about 116 million ounces. According to the Fed's own records, this was the largest peaceful transfer of wealth from citizens to the government in American history. But the real magic happened next. On January 30, 1934, Congress passed the Gold Reserve Act. It moved all gold from the Federal Reserve banks to the U.S. Treasury and then revalued the metal to $35 per ounce. A 69% increase, achieved not by markets but purely by legal decree. Here's what that means in human terms. If you surrendered 100 ounces of gold in 1933, you received $2,067 in paper notes. Only months later, that same gold officially backed $3,500. The $1,433 difference was quietly absorbed by the Federal Reserve and Treasury. Multiply that across 300 tons of confiscated gold and the government effectively captured about $3 billion in purchasing power, around $69 billion in today's terms, without producing a single dollar's worth of real economic output. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet exploded. Their gold certificates were now valued at $35 per ounce instead of $20.67, creating $2.8 billion in new lending capacity instantly. Meanwhile, the newly formed Exchange Stabilization Fund, still active today, received $2 billion of that windfall, granting Treasury officials broad, permanent authority to intervene in foreign exchange markets. Your great-grandparents didn't lose wealth. Their wealth was redirected. And here's the truth: 1933 wasn't America's first monetary reset. Congress had manipulated gold and silver ratios multiple times between 1792 and 1900. But the 1933-1934 reset established the modern playbook, the same mechanism used again and again whenever the system requires restructuring. And all of it happened without hyperinflation, without foreign invasion, and without total economic collapse. All it required was legal authority in a time of crisis. The Emergency Banking Act, passed on March 9, 1933, gave the president sweeping monetary powers after only 8 hours of congressional debate. The entire monetary transformation from bank shutdowns to gold revaluation took only 10 months. Here's what this teaches us about the system. Central banking authorities can freeze the financial structure, confiscate monetary assets, redefine the pricing unit, recapitalize themselves through accounting entries, and shift purchasing power from households to institutions, all using legislation and executive action. And the legal basis came from an unexpected place. The 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act, created for wartime financial control. Roosevelt repurposed that wartime statute to reorganize domestic monetary arrangements. And that law, amended but very much alive, still exists in the US Code today. So what happens when the system needs another reset? What happens when a modern architecture built on debt, derivatives, and digital ledgers requires the same treatment gold received in 1933? The answer is simple: the template still exists. The authority is still on the books. And the pattern has already been repeated. Just look at how the same mechanism appeared again and again throughout the century. 1944, Bretton Woods, the US, controlling 59% of the world's official gold reserves, anchored the global monetary system to the dollar at $35 per ounce. All major currencies became dependent on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. 1971, Nixon closes the gold window. Foreign central banks held $50 billion in dollar claims, representing 1.43 billion ounces of gold. The Fed had only 276 million ounces. The math made the system impossible. Nixon ended gold convertibility on August 15, creating a new monetary order overnight. The US reduced its gold-related liabilities by hundreds of millions of ounces without surrendering a single bar. 1985, Plaza Accord. The US, Japan, West Germany, France, and the UK coordinated to intentionally devalue the dollar. Japan and Germany suffered massive reserve losses. American exporters gained competitiveness. Once again, wealth shifted, not disappeared. 2020-2022 balance sheet expansion. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet soared from $4.24 trillion to $8.96 trillion in just 25 months. The Fed effectively created an amount of liquidity larger than the entire German economy, using authority granted by laws written over a century ago. The pattern is unmistakable. Every monetary reset follows 5 steps: legal foundation, asset redenomination, unilateral revaluation, international intervention, central bank balance sheet expansion. And that 5-part mechanism is being rebuilt today, not with gold, but with digital monetary architecture capable of executing the same power shifts at unprecedented speed. The lesson from 1933 is clear: wealth doesn't vanish. It moves. It shifts hands through laws, decrees, and accounting entries. And every time the system transforms, the institutions that control money issuance gain power, while those holding yesterday's version of money absorb the cost. The reset of 1933 wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the system we are still living in, and the foundation for the reset that is now on the horizon. The Federal Reserve's emergency credit programs rolled out on March 23, 2020, specifically the primary and secondary market corporate credit facilities, gave the New York Fed the authority to step directly into the corporate bond market. By the end of that year, the Fed held $13.7 billion in corporate bonds and bond ETFs on its books. Meanwhile, the Municipal Liquidity Facility extended another $6.6 billion in loans to state and local governments. Here's what those moves meant beneath the surface. That intervention wasn't just an economic rescue, it represented a massive structural expansion. The Fed's balance sheet swelled by $4.72 trillion, all of it appearing as new central bank liabilities, bank reserves, backed by U.S. Treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. Commercial banks, holding those reserves, suddenly had enormous lending capacity. The Treasury, on the other hand, financed $6.6 trillion in COVID-related spending between March 2020 and December 2021, and the Fed conveniently became the silent buyer of its debt, almost all at near-zero interest rates. But someone always pays for expansions of this size. This time the cost fell squarely on savers. Anyone holding dollars in March 2020 watched inflation rocket to 9.1% by June 2022, the fastest erosion of purchasing power since the early 1980s. Savings accounts that earned close to nothing, fixed pensions without cost of living adjustments, and salaries that stayed flat for 2 years all lost 15–20% of real value while the Fed doubled its balance sheet. Different era. Different tools. But the same underlying mechanism as 1933. In 1933, the government seized gold and then revalued it upward. Between 2020 and 2022, the Federal Reserve bought assets and revalued the dollar downward through inflation. In one case, the wealth transfer came from revaluation spreads on gold. In the other, it came from the declining purchasing power of cash. But the mathematics were identical. Value moved from the public to the institutions positioned at the core of the system. Every reset in American monetary history follows this same architecture. Use legal authority that already exists. Redefine the monetary reference point through executive or central bank action. Recapitalize the financial system through accounting changes. Transfer purchasing power from citizens holding old monetary units to institutions plugged into the new ones. The winners and losers remain consistent. Winners: those inside central banking institutions or holding assets that appreciate in the new system. Losers: anyone holding cash, fixed deposits, long-term bonds, or any asset priced in the old depreciating unit. In 1933, citizens holding gold lost to the Federal Reserve's revalued balance sheet. In 1971, foreign governments holding dollars lost to America's new unlimited issuance regime. In 1985, Japanese savers holding dollars lost through coordinated currency devaluation. In 2020-2022, American savers holding cash lost to quantitative easing and inflation. Different stories, different justifications, different political atmospheres. But the same mathematical outcome every time. Purchasing power migrates from millions of distributed holders to a handful of centralized institutions. And now, in 2025, the infrastructure for the next reset is being assembled. This time, however, the technology offers something the architects of 1933 could never have imagined. A system where every monetary unit can be tracked, every transaction can be logged, and interest rates, including negative ones, can be applied directly to your savings without the need to confiscate anything physically. Let me show you what's being built while the public is distracted by stock prices and political theater. As of 2024, the Atlantic Council reports that 108 countries, representing 95% of global GDP, are developing or exploring central bank digital currencies. That's not coincidence. That's coordination. And the global digital architecture now under construction makes the 1933 gold seizure look like a slow, analog experiment. To understand why, look at what happened during the COVID crisis. March 2020 exposed a major flaw in the current monetary system. The Federal Reserve can create trillions in bank reserves, but it can't deliver money directly to citizens. It relies on commercial banks, Congress, and the IRS. The system is slow, fragmented, and inefficient. Huge portions of stimulus sat idle in bank accounts instead of circulating. The Fed pumped $4.72 trillion into reserves in under 2 years. But spending didn't rebound until Treasury stimulus checks finally landed. According to Federal Reserve research, Americans accumulated roughly $2.3 trillion in excess savings during 2020-2021 because they received money they couldn't spend under lockdown conditions. Central banks studied this and saw the solution: remove the intermediaries. A CBDC allows them to place digital money directly in citizen wallets, program it to expire if not spent, track every movement of currency, and fine-tune policy in real time. The Bank for International Settlements, the central bank for central banks, launched its Innovation Hub in 2019 to coordinate CBDC development globally. Project Dunbar, a joint initiative between Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, and South Africa, successfully tested multi-CBDC settlements that cleared cross-border transactions in seconds, not days. If this becomes standard, the infrastructure that gives the US dollar dominance today, SWIFT messaging, correspondent banking, settlement delays, becomes irrelevant. The Federal Reserve Bank of Boston's collaboration with MIT, known as Project Hamilton, published research in February 2022 showing a CBDC system capable of processing 1.7 million transactions per second. For comparison, Visa peaks around 65,000. The Federal Reserve publicly remains non-committal. Its January 2022 paper Money and Payments outlines possible features, but stops short of endorsing issuance. But here's the important part: they're already installing the digital wiring. On July 20, 2023, the Fed launched FedNow, allowing instant payments 24/7 365. By the end of 2024, roughly 900 financial institutions were enrolled. FedNow is not a CBDC, but it's the backbone on which one would run. The wiring is being laid before the appliance arrives. If you want to see the working prototype, look to China. China's digital yuan, rolled out in pilot programs in 2020, has processed nearly $250 billion across 950 million transactions as of late 2023. But the volume isn't the real story, the features are. Programmable money. During COVID, the Chinese government issued digital yuan that expired if not spent by certain dates. Total transaction visibility. Every digital yuan transaction is recorded in central bank ledgers. Direct distribution. The central bank can deposit funds straight to citizen wallets, bypassing banks entirely. In June 2024, China's mBridge platform linked the digital yuan with Hong Kong, Thailand, and the UAE. In 6 months, it processed $22 billion in cross-border settlements, no SWIFT required. What does this mean for the US monetary system? Think back to 1933. Those holding the old money, gold, lost purchasing power when the system revalued. In a digital reset, the same effect can happen via code. Winners in the new system will be central banks able to apply negative interest rates directly, treasury departments gaining cheaper borrowing through direct monetization, major banks partnering in CBDC rollout, financial surveillance agencies gaining perfect visibility, and the losers? Holders of physical cash, because withdrawal protection disappears, savers seeking privacy, because CBDCs erase anonymity, users of alternative currencies, because legal tender CBDCs make them obsolete, developing nations reliant on the dollar, because global settlement networks are being rebuilt. But the most important mechanism is this. Programmability allows wealth transfer without physical confiscation. In 1933, the government needed penalties and agents to seize gold. In a CBDC system, the reset can occur through a conversion event. Digital dollars convert to a new unit, let's call it DDUs, at a rate chosen by monetary authorities. A 30% conversion haircut reduces liabilities instantly. Citizens holding $100,000 wake up to see $70,000 in the new unit. The remaining value recapitalizes the system. No gold trucks. No executive orders. Just a software update. The Federal Reserve's own technical papers show CBDC adjustments can propagate within seconds across every wallet in the country. What might trigger such a reset? The same thing that triggered 1933, unsustainable debt. U.S. federal debt passed $36 trillion in 2024. Net interest payments reached $892 billion, surpassing defense spending. When debt service overwhelms tax revenue, the government must choose between formal default or monetary restructuring. History shows they always choose restructuring. And the CBDC infrastructure provides the perfect tool. Bring this full circle. On April 5, 1933, Americans were forced to surrender gold. Their purchasing power dropped 41%. In 2025, digital dollars feel safe just like gold felt safe in 1933. But the institutions that restructured the gold standard are now building the digital standard. The mechanism hasn't changed. Only the technology has. Crisis creates urgency, emergency powers activate the monetary system, restructures wealth, moves from the holders of old units to the controllers of new ones. It happened in 1933. It happened in 1971. It happened in 2020. And the pattern suggests it will happen again, only this time at the speed of software.